I recently had the honor of sitting down with the incredible Matthew Cappucci, someone who is truly changing the game in the world of weather. Matthew has been passionate about meteorology since he was a kid, and he's accomplished more than most people ever dream of. At just 14 years old, he made history as the youngest ever presenter at the American Meteorological Society. Matthew has also written two amazing books, Looking Up, which explores his passion for storm chasing, and Extreme Weather for Kids, which makes meteorology exciting and understandable for the next generation. Through it all, he's built a huge following, with nearly 63,000 people on X tuning in to his insights on everything from hurricanes to heat waves. We covered it all, how Matthew has revolutionized the way local meteorology is done, his wild storm chasing adventures, and where he sees the future of broadcast meteorology heading. You'll also hear some behind the scenes stories, like how he balances being a trusted science communicator with his adventurous spirit, and how he's managed to make weather fun and relatable for so many people, including kids. Stick around, you don't want to miss it.
So first of all, thank you so much for joining me today. This is the first ever edition of the extended podcast that I'm starting soon, hopefully. Fingers crossed it goes well this time, because I tried to start it a year or two ago, never really followed through. But this time I think it's actually gonna happen.
Nice. Well, thank you for having me, and I'm glad I'm the first one. So I guess the pressure's on. I could either really tank this and screw over your podcast, or it could go well and people help.
You're like the guinea pig here. It's always interesting to see what's going to happen.
I'll try to behave.
All right, so before we dive too deep, the obvious that your name's Matthew, my name's Matthew. You're a meteorologist, I'm a meteorologist. You went to Harvard, I went to college, so we're basically the same person.
One and the same.
All right, so going to Harvard, obviously that's a very prestigious school. Do you feel like that opened a lot of doors for you in your career and over the past few years since you graduated?
So, truth be told, the reason I went to Harvard wasn't because I wanted prestige. It was because I wanted to graduate without debt. Not many people know, but Harvard has the best financial aid of any school. And so it would have only cost me about $8,000 a year out of pocket to go to Harvard, whereas Linden State in Vermont, for example, cost 32 grand a year or something like that. And so I knew that I could work during the semester and pay off my time at Harvard while still being there and not graduate in debt. And if I played my cards right, graduate with a little money saved, which is the reason I went there. In terms of whether it's opened doors, I think it sort of gave me a bit of gravitas in settings that otherwise I wouldn't have it. There's so many people out there who say, wow, you're a meteorologist. Like, that's cute. What's it like to be like a pretend scientist? All the time. And I even used to get that from my friends at school. They'd be like, really? You want to be a weatherman? And I'm like, yeah. And then if I tell them I got an atmospheric science degree from Harvard, they're like, oh, so you really know the science. Like, you people on TV are actual scientists. And so I think for me, it's helped my brand be more sort of techie, sciencey, and a little bit heavier hitting. And also it's helped me negotiate at times as well for, increased salary, et cetera, which in today's day and age is necessary.
Yeah, because a lot of places, especially broadcast, the salaries are not what people would think they would be, and probably going to get worse in the years to come.
Yeah, I mean, when I applied to Fox 5 in DC back in 2021, I had no TV experience at all. Never took a broadcasting class, never took any writing. And on a whim, I applied. And the news director called me up and was like, hey, we see your degree. You clearly know your stuff. You can learn TV on the go. Come give it a whirl. And I did. It was so much fun. Loved it. Did that for 2.5 years. I loved my boss, loved the station. But as you mentioned, TV pay is dropping. I got a 35% pay cut at the end of my second or third contract. And, it came up rather suddenly, so I don't do that anymore. But yeah, in today's day and age, you got to market yourself however you possibly can.
Yeah. So we were talking about before this that we both did the morning show. I still do. Do you ever miss getting up that early to going to work, or is it like, I'm glad that that's over with now?
I miss it for many reasons. I miss being a part of people's day. I'm a morning person. I miss, waking up and chit-chatting with people and just helping them get their day started. I love that aspect. One tricky thing for me in the morning show was because it was so fast-paced, I never had full time to really substantively dive into data or dive into the science as much as I wanted. And my whole goal is to teach people something new. And that's tough when you only have 45 seconds. What can I do that Nav can't do? And so now, ironically, I work for an app and I do the forecast in the app, and I have as much time as I want and free reign to be as technical as I want. But I definitely miss getting up early. I don't miss getting up at 2 a.m. early. I miss like the 5 a.m. weekend show. That was like the perfect balance for me. I get up at 5, be home by 10, could have a social life too. Getting up at 2 a.m. and sometimes earlier because I'd have to do my radar stuff before that. I do the morning show, come home at 11 a.m., work my 9 to 5, squeeze a Washington Post article in during the commercial breaks, do radio in the afternoons, take a little nap, get up, run 8 miles, and then tutor students in the evening and sleep a total of 3 hours per day. And that got to be a little bit much. So I don't miss how hectic my schedule was.
Yeah, and you mentioned working with My Radar and the Washington Post. Do you still have any involvement at all in media besides the videos you do, or is it purely those two things now?
I still work pretty much everywhere. So the only thing I don't do is local news. I'm fully remote now, which has been a game changer because if there's weather happening, I can be there. And I can bring, it's 2025. I can bring every organization with me simply by using my phone. So every day I get up, I do an article for the Washington Post. I do my forecast videos for My Radar. And it's cool because we can geotag and like geofence where we want those forecast videos to go and send a push notification to everybody in that zone. So we deliver them really timely, but really geographically relevant material, which I love. Even yesterday, for example, I did a special push alert about 12 hours before the Sting jet arrived in Western Ireland. And I did a special forecast for Galway. And it works. People get the message. It's like tapping them. We always used to joke, people don't get weather information because we can't tap them on the shoulder. With this, we literally can tap them on the shoulder in their pocket, so to speak. So I do that. What else do I do? I do radio hits for NPR a couple times a week. I also freelance for pretty much everybody. And so if PBS needs a meteorologist, they call me and I go down to the studio. If BBC News needs someone, right before this, I did BBC World News. If DW, the Germans, need a meteorologist, I do all their weather. Who else? Sky News Arabia. Even though I don't speak Arabic, they dub me over. And I do the Australian Today show from time to time. I do ABC Australia. So if there's a big weather event, I'm going pretty much nonstop, 24 hours. And I love that. And I feel like it gives me a bigger reach than I had with local TV. I was so worried leaving local TV that I'd lose relevance. People would forget about me. And 20 years ago, that would have been the case. If you leave local TV, you fade off into the sunset and no one remembers you. But these days, I feel like that was the last source where people saw me. And now it's everywhere else. It's social media, it's the internet. And oh, by the way, he did the forecast a couple times a week on TV.
Yeah, I see those pictures behind you. I know you go storm chasing a lot and really go all over the place. Do you like that flexibility to go wherever the weather's happening and just report from the actual storms themselves?
I love it. So one thing that was funny, my second month on the job doing Fox 5 here in DC, I had basically been bickering with the bosses saying, tornadoes are coming Wednesday, tornadoes are coming Wednesday. And everyone was like, all right, rookie, like, okay, grandpa, go to bed now. And I was like, no, really, tornadoes are coming. And so one particular day I worked the morning show and I was badgering them and I was like, hey, it's noontime now, tornadoes are gonna be happening by 2 p.m. Can I stay? And they're like, no, we're not paying overtime. So anyway, I hid behind the green screen for a little while in case tornado warnings popped. And I could see things were starting to cook up. I went back and I badgered the assistant news director again. I was like, hey, tornadoes are still coming. Like, can I do it? He was like, Matthew, get out of here. We have 3 meteorologists. We don't need you here. And I was like, but I'm the tornado guy. And he's like, Matthew, leave. So I stomped my foot. I'm like, fine, I'll do it on my own. And I sprint out of the building in my suit and tie. And I'm basically like stripping in the street as I'm yanking off my jacket, yanking off, everything, throwing on gym shorts and t-shirt. And I drive to where I think on a whim, a tornado might happen. And lo and behold, EF2 touches down right in front of me in Annapolis, Maryland, destroying homes, all that stuff. And I'm on the side of the road like, hey there, gang, tornado behind me, blah, blah, blah. And it revolutionized our coverage that day. No one on the East Coast had ever done that before. And suddenly they were like, wow, like there's a value to this. And they offered me the morning show. And or they offered full time with the presumption of it being the early morning shift. But I knew that if I did local TV, I'd have to sort of give up the travel. I'd have to full time. I'd have to give up everything else. And so I worked out a part-time deal with them. But now as My Radar senior meteorologist, I get the flexibility to do whatever I want and go anywhere. They've never said don't go. They've never said we're not funding this. They've never said, stay home, sit this one out. They've never even told me where to position. I'm a firm believer that if you have a scientist in the field, they know better than anyone where they should position for safety and for also getting the shot. And they've been great about letting me go and see and do whatever I want. I have the weirdest contract in the entire world. I've never seen a contract like this. I mean, it guarantees storm chasing. Who has that?
Yeah.
It's the best. So I do this local TV, but this lifestyle is cool. I mean, I got to go to 13 countries last year because I work remote.
So do you have anything big planned in the short term, or is this like more so the spring and summer months?
So usually by like April 15th, April 20th, I'm out there on the plains, and I should be there until the start of June this year. I cannot wait for my extended storm chase. That's like my therapy all year long. I have a countdown clock on my phone, counting down how much longer until storm chase season, because really, I don't know what I feel like every year I long for it more. I either need to move out to Oklahoma or I don't know what other recourse there is, but I just wait all year long for it. And that's like the highlight of my year. Back when I was in college, you know how little kids will have those Christmas chains they make out of paper and they rip one chain off every day? I'd have those across my dorm for storm chase season. It'd be like, wow, only 27 links left until tornadoes. But yeah, so that's kind of my big plan for the year. Obviously, hurricanes will come when they do. I'm hoping to do a month in Italy this year or a month in Europe and maybe chase some European weather. And then come December, I might go down to Argentina and do some chasing there. But yeah, I'm in a weird boat where I don't have any like jumps to make. For years, I was trying to jumpstart my career and climb and whatnot. And now I'm like, well, I have a 3-year contract. I got 2.5 years left. I like where I'm at. It's an easy job. They pay for me to chase tornadoes. I'm just kind of cruising. And part of me loves that comfort, but also part of me, like, I need something more to aspire to. I don't know. I feel like I need to figure out like what my next project is.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Having seen so much and been so many places, is there anything that you still really want to see that you haven't seen yet?
Yes. And this will sound so corny. And I've been asked this question before, and I always give the same answer. It's kind of sad. It's kind of sweet. When you get to see and do so much, it's amazing, but you almost become desensitized to the incredible stuff you see. When I was 9, 10 years old, actually, how old was I? I was in 6th grade. It was June 24th, 2008. Anyway, so I was 11 years old. We got a little hailstorm where I grew up in Cape Cod, Mass. And we were getting like dime to nickel sized hail. I had never seen hail before. It was like the highlight of my childhood to that point, running around, going outside, collecting these little itty bitty hailstones. And it's funny because back then that was such a huge event for me. And now, I drive into DVD sized hail. I have a 3D printer. You've seen my hailstone collection, right? Here, let me grab my show and tell.
Show and tell time.
It takes about this much to excite me. And so I feel like I'm getting desensitized to some of the amazing things I see. And I think that's what happens to everybody in life. As they age, they see and they experience more. Some of it loses its luster. But the antidote to that is being able to see it through someone else's eyes. It's like, when you're in your 20s and your 30s, the magic of Christmas kind of fizzles until you have kids of your own, and suddenly you get to experience that magic again through their eyes. And so in my case, I hope someday to have someone, whether it be a partner in crime or whoever, to bring around to show these amazing things and get to see the excitement of showing the people I love something amazing like this. Like my mother wants to come storm chasing this year. I would love that because for her to get to see her first tornado would be awesome. Or years ago, I took a buddy of mine to see the Northern Lights, or I took, one of my friends to see a meteor shower. All these things, or even back in college, I had a buddy from Poland who always wanted to see a tornado. And so I phoned him up one day and I said, all right, now's your chance. You have 24 hours to get down to Dallas. And he got to see a tornado and we made it happen. And so I love stuff like that. And that's part of the reason why I'm in media. I like showing people the amazing stuff out there. And so the short answer, I guess that was the long answer, but the short answer is I want to keep seeing what it is I see and doing what it is I do. but I want the passenger seat to have someone in it.
Yeah, and it seems like you really like to have people learn stuff alongside you, not just show them it, but why it's happening and the reasons behind the science too. A lot of people growing up told me that people didn't want to know about the science. They want to know, is it going to rain? Do I need to wear this and that? Do you feel that more people than the public thinks actually do want to learn the science?
I think you're exactly right. Growing up, I heard the same thing. Everyone was like, oh, write at a sixth grade level, or keep your sound bites short, or they only care what they have to wear that day. Don't do more than just the basics. And I feel like, honestly, that came from two sources. Complacent old meteorologists, and we all know, we've all worked with someone who shows up, they have the graphics on autoplay, they do their presentation, they collect their nice paycheck from having been there since the 1970s, 1980s, and they go home, and their heart's not in it. So it either came from that, or it comes from consultants. They have their heads so far up their rear, they don't know what the viewer wants. And so it got to the point where I was like, you know what? I want to do weather a certain way. Somebody will let me do the science. And it wound up being Jason Semino from the Washington Post. And his entire brand is educating people on the science. People want that extra mile. They want to go deeper. I really think everybody has this innate curiosity of the weather, but it's never nurtured because everyone else suppresses the science. And so Jason let me run with it. And it started bleeding into my radio forecasts. And I garnered a following. And once the sort of proof of concept was proven that you can be nerdy in the radio, you can be nerdy in TV, then it just spread. And my radar came calling, and Fox 5 came calling, and Fox Weather came calling, and the Weather Channel never called. And a few other entities kept calling, and then all the international outlets kept calling. And so I think there is an appetite for that. The tricky part is, I mean, you're in the same boat as me. You've been doing the weather for what, 5, 6 years?
About 4.5, yeah.
Okay. So when did you graduate?
2020.
Okay. I was
Right
2019.
during COVID.
Oh gosh, that must have been rough. But
Perfect
yeah, I mean,
timing.
we're 4 or 5 years into our career, and the way people consume information is changing so fast. So it's almost like I have to unlearn everything I learned for TV and figure out how to cater to an ever dwindling attention span. And there's no easy way to do it.
Yeah, and I feel like once you prove that you know the science behind it, people trust you more during not just sunny days, but also like the really important weather too, hurricanes, tornadoes, things like that. Do you feel like that gives you more credibility to have that knowledge basis to it as well?
In a heartbeat. I had a competitor a couple of years back, and we were having a conversation about this. And this competitor was afraid to get his hair wet. He never wanted to go outside during the storm, always wanted to be in studio, didn't want to show anything techie. And, that was his brand. And he just wanted to always look good for the camera. And I said to him, what is the purpose of that? He said, well, we work in an industry where, everybody's looking at us. And I said, I'd much rather someone listen to what I have to say than look at me. No one cares what we look like on camera. No one cares about the fanciness of the graphics. No one cares about the lighting in the studio. They care about credibility, relating with someone. If you've never seen a tornado, if you've never seen a hurricane, you've never been through whatever, how can we go on air and explain to people what they're going to face if we've never faced it? Whereas if I'm in the hurricane, I can say to people, all right, here's what's happening. Here's what you're about to hear. Here's what you're about to experience. One of the most successful videos that we did at My Radar that was such a low effort on my end. I didn't think anyone would do it. It was a hurricane fireside chat ahead of Milton. And I literally just sat down and I timed out, no graphics, nothing. It was just literally me in the studio with one light. And I just timed out what people would see or hear or experience. 8 hours from now, 7 hours from now, 6 hours from now, counting down into the eye of the storm. What does it sound like? What does it smell like? Well, you'll notice, what noises will you hear? The water in your toilet's going to be moving back and forth. Why is that? There will be a gap before you get to the eye wall. What is the eye wall like? How do you know when you're in the eye? Why is it still misty? Why is it still whatever? Stop and listen for the tree frogs. Like all these little environmental cues about people's personal experience. And suddenly people will say, wow, he's lived this life before. He's sort of, experienced this. We'll take his word for it. I think the other thing too that we sometimes in the media struggle with is nuance. I mean, so often the media will be like, oh, so and so didn't evacuate, dummy. It's almost like the media victim blames, and no one is willing to, or no one makes an effort to go on and have a nuanced conversation about the difficulties of evacuation or the difficulties of this. It almost comes down to, it's like this will be a weird way to say it, but it almost comes down to like the politics of media. And what I mean by that is, so often a reporter, a meteorologist, a newscaster is so removed from the people they serve, especially if they're serving a national audience, which all of us are increasingly doing by virtue of social media. And I think there's just so much benefit to just getting out there and meeting people and understanding their priorities, their experiences before, pulling up to your random hotel when you're storm chasing and going to the tiny watering hole pub or bar next door and talking to the servers and talking to the patrons and whatnot. That's been so useful to me to get to know different areas, both the geography, but also the people and the culture. And I think that's what's really helped my forecasts to be relatable.
Yeah, and you were talking about social media, obviously a very important part of our jobs nowadays. But there is the negative side too, the conspiracy theories, the growing concern about the government having a role in weather. What are your thoughts on the problem with that, and also why it's becoming so rampant too?
Legacy media needs to figure out how they want to handle social media. News stations are in a weird boat where they're trying to push personality, but also they're trying to appease everyone. We see the internet is filled with fringe views, and these views are garnering so much support. Look at a few months ago, the drone thing. That all came from like literally mass hysteria and social media. And every news station, including the DC area, sent reporters out to literally stand beneath airplanes and report on these possible drones flying overhead. Maryland Governor Larry Hogan stood outside, took videos of the constellations, and talked about how he had 25 drones over his house. ABC Nightly News ran a B-roll of airplanes flying overhead. And it's crazy what proliferates and how professional media these days will write a story based on social media. In other words, they're not writing a story based on facts, they're writing a story based on social media reports, or they're writing a story based on social media reactions. Going on air and saying, outrage over blah on social media. That's not a story. You can find a tweet saying anything. That doesn't make it a story. So I feel like social media not only has allowed bad information to perpetuate further, but also has almost tricked the actual media into underreporting and not doing their due diligence.
And I want to kind of tie things up by talking about the future of broadcast meteorology and just kind of meteorology as a whole. Of course, Allen Media Group recently getting rid of all their local meteorologists and then reversing course on some of them to bring them back. What do you think the future looks like for not just that company, but any broadcast or media group dealing with the weather and just kind of news in general?
Oof. Truth be told, how do I phrase this nicely? What Allen Media did, and eventually reverse course, is not the end of that. I think it's largely the beginning of a mass consolidation. There are 206 different TV markets in the country, and realistically, most of them are not profitable enough to justify having a $500,000 a year weather team. For, if you have a mid-market, 4 meteorologists, insurance, benefits, all that stuff, yeah, $300,000 to $500,000 a year for local weather. There's just not that ad revenue coming in for most little markets. Media markets will see dwindling salaries as well. Even the large markets are seeing dwindling salaries. I mean, heck, I got a 35% pay cut. So the big salaries in TV are gone. And even the healthy salaries are dropping fast, especially for low to mid markets. Small markets are going to be closing or consolidating. You're not going to have 4 channels in one market. And I think a lot of the mid-sized markets will be consolidating. So it'll be more the hub and spoke model. Like we're already seeing that now in Oklahoma. The Tulsa news comes out of Oklahoma City. In Texas, some markets have newscasts out of Dallas. There's no need for four meteorologists at every station. And believe me, I'm on team meteorology here. There's so much more that comes from having local meteorologists. There's so much more that comes from having people who know their area inside and out, but it's not financially feasible going forward. So I think all the major networks are going to switch to more like, an expert desk and maybe one local meteorologist in the future to supplement. But I think this is just the start. And this will be in the next 2-3 years. I think that trust in the media is at an all-time low. And part of that is the political climate. I get that. But part of it too is that media resources are spread so thin that there's little effort left for extra journalism. Case in point, the drones. The entire country's media ran with a story that didn't exist. My former station ran with a story that didn't really exist. And we've seen that everywhere. So, heck, I'll see a media story and I'll question whether or not it's legitimate, and I'll do my own digging to see if it is, especially if it's a science story. And so I think TV is going to either become all streaming, and then they're already late to the party because Ryan Hall and Max Velocity are light years ahead of them, or there will just be so much consolidation that I'd say 75% of local TV meteorology jobs will vanish. Now that sounds terribly daunting, especially for all of us who are in our 20s. How are we going to make a 35, 40-year broadcast career? And the answer is we're not. We're all going to become multimedia meteorologists. We're going to have to scoop up jobs where their jobs exist. So, right now I work for the Washington Post. I do video for my radar. I do, TV hits for international outlets. I think our role will shift away from being local experts and more subject matter experts, because on 80% of the days anyway, people don't care about the weather. I don't even know what it's doing outside in DC right now. And frankly, I don't really care unless something big is happening. And so our importance will continue, and we'll get more eyeballs with social media during those high-end events. But the need for local day-to-day meteorologists is just waning so fast. And I know in advance, I'm going to get some unhappy tweets about that. But my job is to be realistic about my industry, not optimistic.
So for somebody in college now or thinking about becoming a meteorologist, would you not really advise them, but caution them against the broadcast field and more the government field, or pursue your dreams no matter what?
I always tell folks, have a dream and then have a way to pay the bills. My dream when I was little was to chase tornadoes. However, well, I guess I don't count, but in most cases, there's not really a job where you get paid to just drive around and look at tornadoes. I lucked out. But you got to have a dream and a backup plan. I would love to just be independently wealthy and sit in a private yacht all day and eat bonbons, but I know that's not realistic. And so for the folks who are in school now for meteorology, I'd say meteorology, great career. It's always going to be here, especially as weather events get increasingly severe, populations expand, and risk and vulnerability skyrocket. But broadcasting, I would never major in broadcast, ever, 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 ever. I think journalism degrees are, I'm going to get so many bad comments for this. Journalism degrees are largely a waste of time. Broadcast degrees are largely a waste of time. I say largely, not entirely. There are things to be learned. But broadcast journalism degrees teach a dying style of journalism. TV is fading so fast. And for kids who are in school now, I wouldn't be learning TV. I'd be learning TikTok. I would be learning vertical video. I'd be learning self-marketing. That's what they should be doing. And that's something that everyone can figure out on their own. They have to cultivate their own style. So I would say double down in the meteorology. Take as much science as you can. Get a minor in computer science. Get a minor in heck, Spanish. Get a minor in machine learning. Get a minor in aviation. Marry that love of meteorology with something else that offers additional sectors of the career, but don't plan to go into TV as a 40-year career, because it's going to be a very short career.
Yeah, that's why it's important to have so many different aspects to your job, not just the one thing that might disappear or at least fade away in the years to come.
Yeah, most definitely. It's about, versatility and being able to jump. I have no idea where my career will be in 3 years. My contract is a 3-year contract. I don't know what's going to happen after that. I love my radar. I really do. But I have no idea where the media industry will be. I don't know. I mean, heck, I thought I had more than 2.5 years in local TV before a pay cut came, and I didn't. And so I have no idea. Part of me wonders if I should go back to school and learn something else. Part of me figures I'll play it by ear. Part of me figures if worst comes to worst, I shouldn't say worst comes to worst, but I'd love to be a science teacher well down the road. But I have no idea what I'll do in 3 years. And that's why for the first time in life, I'm just playing it by ear, and it freaks me out. But, I'm going where the wind takes me right now.
Yeah, I'm the kind of person that likes to know what's going to happen, to plan it out well ahead of time. So to not really know where things are going to go is kind of challenging, but just take it day by day.
I agree. It's very daunting, but also there's a little bit of magic and wonder in that. If we knew exactly where our career was going to be or where life was going to take us, I feel like that'd be boring. The unknown element and the inevitable plot twists that come up, I think are a little bit exciting. So I tell myself, you gotta laugh or else you'll cry.
No, I think so too. All right, thank you, Matthew. I think we're just about out of time for my free version of Zoom recording here, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Hey, it was a pleasure. I hope the podcast goes well, and fingers crossed that a lot of people like this, because I'd love to see more episodes of the podcast. I think you'll do a really good job.
Thank you so much for watching the first ever edition of the Extended Forecast. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, comment below, and subscribe for more future great content on the way. And a big thanks to meteorologist Matthew Cappucci for taking the time to speak to me and sharing his passion for weather with all of us.